everyone. Welcome back in. Hi, sister.
Hello, welcome back. Hello.
Ooh, Diana is back with us. As promised, we are rolling through this 9-part series that we are calling Rich. Woo, so much that we want to chat about in this episode. Thank you all for being here. We're just going to get going. And if you do not know Diana Yañez, we are excited to have her back in. All of her information you can gather in the show notes. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a money coach at All the Colors. She's also a wealth manager at Strategy Squad. She does workshops, she does individual and group coaching. She also supports with financial wealth management. There's so much that you have to offer people that get to work with you. And on the last episode, we really dove in around these money archetypes and the shadow sides, the gifts. Y'all truly go listen to the last episode, check out her website. There's 5 archetypes that decipher the ways in which our patterns and how we have just been, or you might be with money, or maybe your family members or friends or people in your circles are. Really powerful work that you're doing, and so supportive and grounded to help us all just really create this new relationship with money. And there was something that you said, and I took a note in our last episode, and I wanted us to like massage a little, is working with debt, because I think we touched on it quite a bit in like the last episode of like, and there's and build the cash cushion and then create this budget and do these things. And I'm really curious to get in this. I mean, let's be real. There's inflation. Prices are crazy right now. Lots of things out in the real world. And how would one even begin to work with debt?
I mean, first, if someone's really, really avoiding it, it's just find out what your balances are. How much do you
Mm,
owe? Who do you owe? Right? On the technical end. Another thing, understand your interest rate. I've worked with people who had credit cards and they had mortgages and they had student loans, and they're all different interest rates. It's really important to understand what those are. Like Einstein said, that interest is the strongest force in the universe, right? Like compounding interest. You might end up paying twice as much or 3 times as much as the principal if you're only making minimum payments on a credit card, right? Because the interest rates can be so high. So those are like 2 really key things. What's the balance? What's the interest rate on the technical side? On the internal side, how did you get into that? What's the story around it? And I'm hats it to Barry Tessler from The Art of Money. She, in her book and her work, she talks about renaming the debt. And she has this beautiful example of somebody that, like, after a really difficult divorce, this person took a trip to Italy and they put it all on their credit card and they felt really, really ashamed because that's not what you're supposed to do with credit cards, right? So they had grown up with being told like credit cards are not for that. So here they were 5 years later with that balance actually higher than what they originally borrowed because they had been avoiding it. They had been avoiding that debt. And the invitation that Barry gave them was to rename that debt, right? Calling it a break after a horrendous divorce, calling it resting, calling it what it is, what it was energetically, spiritually, and then working on it. I also just want to call out that, like, sometimes bankruptcy is the option. Sometimes debt consolidation is the option. There's a lot of different nonprofits across the United States that will help people figure out debt consolidation. But it can be really, especially when we're younger, or like if you're in college and it's the first time you see a credit card, you're like, free money. Learning that it's not free money, but it's actually pretty expensive money can take a while. It can take some bruises. So
yeah.
understand what it is, energetically understand how you got there, and figure out a way. I mean, as you mentioned, inflation is higher, right? Groceries used to cost you this amount, and now they're costing quite a bit more. How do we adjust to that? So taking really different concrete action and being aware of it, not being in denial.
I really like this idea of making adjustments because I know for many people, if they create a budget or they get clear on what their debts are, like, okay, fine, I did it, it's done. And they don't go back and revisit based on changes in the marketplace. It's like, well, this is my budget. Well, maybe you could have spent, I'm making this up, maybe you could have spent $10 million a month on facials. Now that's not really aligned. That doesn't make the most sense. Maybe you used to only spend $5 on gas. Well, that changed. Gasoline prices are a lot higher. You're going to have to spend more than $5. So I hear you saying it is important to know all the things, but also like, be flexible. Like go in and see what has changed. And if things outside of you have changed, then you get to move. You get to shift and pivot.
Yeah, and I talked about in our last episode about how to create a budget, you need to understand your values. I'll share a personal example. So one of my values is adventure. I love getting exposed to new things. I love learning new things, visiting new places, eating new foods. And when I was first graduating from college, I had a bunch of student loans. I couldn't find a job. My income was like unemployment. It was super, super low. And adventure was still part of my values. So what I ended up doing is that once a month, I would take myself to a part of LA that I didn't know. I knew I could afford the gas. I knew I could pack a lunch. And again, I'm saying this, I was like 23, 24. Like, we don't want to be doing that when we're older. But at the time, it fed that value in me so that I didn't feel deprived. And I knew that at the end of the day, a lot of the difficult situations that we're in, we know that they're temporary, just like the joyful situations. Everything's impermanent. You have to remember that around our money. Like if you're making adjustments now, if right now you're like, I'm actually going to tone down on the facials, is it because you just had to do some repairs on your home? Is it because you have a kid in college? Like, what is the reason that you're doing that? And then know that you can go back to those facials once that repair is paid for, once college is done. Also, again, we talked about like women not asking for what we wanted. The wage gap discrepancy is real. Make sure you know what your
Ooh,
income
girl.
is and how it should be. You're gonna have to advocate for yourself.
We talking to some
Mm.
corporate veterans up in here. Oh,
Right? Oh, that's so true. Yeah, that gets the fire going
that hurt.
instantly and going,
That'll get us
come
going.
on. We
That'll get
need
us
to have
going,
that
Diana. That'll
equity. We have to. We have to.
We have
I
to. So
always
we have
told women coming in the door, get your money now. Get it coming in the door. Don't wait on like,
Yeah.
oh, it's a meritocracy. If I perform well, they'll give me the money, the promotion, the
Yeah.
increase. And here goes the inequity
25%.
in payment. Like, no. Get your money coming in the door and then negotiate and advocate all along the way. Women,
and
I love us.
But I want to bring in policy changes. So the state of Massachusetts, I just learned this recently. The state of Massachusetts has outlawed asking people about their previous salary. Now, this means that people who are people of color, women, anybody there's been prejudice against, instead of putting in that lower income that they had before and then having that be the base, they'll just, instead, the employer will just have to think of like, what do we pay for this position? Right? Because that's the way that women will continue to be underpaid.
Well, I'm so glad to know that. I was not aware. That's huge and that is big. And I know, yes, for women and yes, for Black communities, all communities actually, there is that little like, when you're filling it out. Well, I was being underpaid at that job. So if I put that in the box, they're going to keep me there. That is so freeing to be able to say, I'm the rebel who would say, it's commensurate with the responsibilities and scope of the job. I'm not going to be telling you like, oh, I made 10,000 here. And I know that this job that I'm very qualified for is really about 100,000. I'm not going to say 10,000, but if one state has just passed that, that gives me hope that this could be passed across a whole lot of states for the benefit of equity, for the benefit of people feeling more confident when they're filling out these forms and going for the jobs that they might not otherwise go for. Like, put yourself out there. They're not going to ask about past money. That's the past. We're here now. I know I'm on a soapbox, but this really fired me up. I'm so happy to hear that. So happy to hear that.
Yeah, that'll get us, we could just roll with that whole conversation. And this is why I think also it's, because I'm just going to segue because Stacey and I would ride this fire until the end of this episode because it's just, I mean, we've had other episodes on it too, where we really just went in and riffed about this. I am really interested though, no matter where you're at in the pay range, this means of like managing our finances and managing wealth, because I'll share personally, I had it on my goal list for y'all. This was like, I don't know, for 6 years probably. And it stayed financial advisor, find financial advisor every year. And I would move it. And I will be really honest with you, Diana. I had a hell of a time. I went and met with folks. I went and was actually being active, taking action, right? So it's not like I was fully avoiding, but it was not a fun experience, because I was running into people where there was a money threshold and I had to have this much in my retirements or in my different funds, and I wasn't there yet. And so then I felt like I kept hitting these roadblocks, and truly was like, no one is going to help me. All I'm trying to understand is how and what would be the best way with where I am right now to manage for retirement, which that's a word I really honestly I don't believe in and I don't embody, because I hold that I will be doing joyous things through my, final day. But it was such a thing for me until then finally 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, got across that off of my goal list and found someone and found some support. And so it seems like it's a ride. Even
Yeah.
once you commit to it, I'm not going to avoid and let me get support with this. Do you have any insights? Maybe there's another woman. I don't know if you're out there and you're like, yeah, I've had that on my goal list too. I see you.
Yeah, there for finances, the way the finance industry is set up right now, it's as if we only want to deal with people who have already, like, quote unquote, made it, right? It's as if doctors only wanted to see healthy people. They only want to see you if you can run a marathon, which is why I started money coaching, which is why I expanded my services so that I could really I can see anybody, right? I've seen people who are receiving unemployment to people who are inheriting a ton of money. So just managing all those complexities. A lot of the beginning is learning the education, right? Learning the language. And it's also, so it's like financial literacy around the concepts, but also I invite people to grow their emotional financial literacy. So Stacey, I don't remember if in the workshop that you attended, I always start my workshops talking about freeze, fight, flight, fawn, honestly, because
Mhm.
money is related to our sense of survival, right? Can we pay for food and shelter? It can be very easy to get activated around it, right? And when our body is in survival mode, it means that there's less blood going through our cognitive cortex. So we have our ability to make logical decisions, to understand abstract concepts is hindered by that like survival desire. So the emotional financial literacy is figuring out what sets you up, right? What makes it harder to have the question? If you go and you meet with a financial advisor that could potentially help you, and you're sensing yourself be really tense or wanting to argue or feeling really sleepy, right? Feeling really sleepy is kind of that freeze response. Be gentle with it and learn more about it, right? What is that? How is like falling asleep whenever it comes to money serving you? It's usually an avoidance tactic. But like you said, Joe, like what if you're not avoiding? What if you're out there looking? It's the DIY part of it. right? So as you're reading the money books, I love The Art of Money. I love You Can Live oh my gosh,
Oh,
Ramit
Happy Little
Sethi.
Pocket of Money or
No,
something.
I don't know about them, but there's Ramit Sethi. I like his work. He's got a couple of different Netflix episodes, and also podcast. Start to
Have you read The
become,
Soul of Money?
yes, years ago by Lynn Twiz.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one got me.
It's on my list to reread because I read Lynn Twist's book back before I wanted to be in financial planning. I remember
Ah,
it was back when I thought like, oh, there's no way that money could ever be used for good.
Fair.
Need to come back. And
yeah.
I'm such a
Yeah.
ways. So it's
Yeah, I've written down this Art of Money book because you mentioned it a couple times. So I'm like,
yes.
okay, that might get to be another one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's so many different books, but as you're learning, as you're doing the financial literacy, stay in touch with that emotional financial literacy. How are you doing emotionally? Because you want it to be sustainable. At the end of the day, like when we're children and realize what money is, up until we die or like lose cognitive capacity, we're in relationship with money. So you want it to be sustainable, consistent, securely attached.
Mm.
I love a good secure attachment.
Yeah. Healthy, secure attachments. Oh, so good.
Oh my gosh. And I
So
also had
good.
this vision, Stacy, of Diana. It'd be yummy to incorporate some our Ishtara nervous system body work with
I know.
this money
Everything that
wisdom of yours.
we talked about, I was like, yeah, there's so much integration that could happen, so many synergies. So we'll go into the lab and more to come.
We'll meet you in the lab, Diana.
We'll do that. I do have a question, Diana, because I think it's important for all of us to understand when specifically we're talking about women or communities that have historically been oppressed financially. There are so many different things that come up. What would you, and I know you can't give like specific advice and all that kind of stuff, but what would you advise for women in these historically underserved and oppressed communities? What would you advise as far as us creating a more healthy relationship with money if the starting block is farther back? Like, I was born into a family or a community or a body where inherently I'm already starting back here. So, how do I even get to the point of saying, yes, I want to create a healthy relationship with money when I've got all this that I'm dealing with?
Yeah. It's both like learning the information. What are the actual tactical tools that you have to have in place? How much do you invest? How aggressively do you invest? What kind of debt do you get? When do you leverage that? Because that can be used for good, for business and for education. Those are like the very tactical things. On the more internal things, when you have that generational money trauma, I think it's like any trauma. What do you do with trauma? You feel it. It's often like from the way that I understand trauma from my mindfulness practices and different things, different classes I've taken. Trauma happens when something's overwhelming, when it's too big for us to hold. So then we kind of put it into a little box and we numb out the area that's related to it. Unfortunately, that numbing can kind of spread to everything else where you're like you're checked out from life, right? That's what trauma does. For people with generational trauma around money, and honestly in capitalism, I think everyone's walking around with it. You could have an unlimited amount of money and still feel really in a lot of scarcity. The thing is to know that was then, this is now. Again, it's like very much trauma work, right? And and growing your range of tolerance with it. With clients that are super money avoidant, I will tell them once a week, 10 minutes. That's it. Spend 10 minutes on your money to-do list. Start the timer, end the timer, respect the timer. Just 10 minutes. Maybe in a month you can increase it to 15. It's a little bit of like heal thyself. Like we each have to hear and listen to ourselves to start to develop that relationship while getting the technical information.
Thank you. I like the both and very much, especially because I hear a lot, even my clients sometimes, I hear a lot of women who are either or. It's like, I'm dealing with all my stuff. I'm like, and where's the aligned action? Where is the tactical part of you actually doing something? Or I'll hear like, I'm doing all this stuff, and it's just not working. Like, you're not doing the inner work. Like it's fine that you created a Google sheet and you put all the things in, but if that still scares you when you look at it and then you don't look at it for 7 months, you still have to do that. So it is the both and as you said, it is for everyone. I just know that for certain communities, there's definitely some generational stuff to deal with.
And sometimes we have to do a little bit of digging, of like, what did I hear about? Like, for example, when I mentioned life insurance, if somebody had a bad, like, I know my grandmother was paying for this whole life policy and she paid for it for 20 years and she didn't understand what she was paying for. And when she was ready to withdraw money from it, the policy was gone. It had eaten itself up. Right. And that's not what she had understood, but she didn't really understand finances. She didn't understand insurance. My grandmother went up to the second grade of elementary school. Like, and here was a person she trusted who was also Mexican, also from our community. So when other people in my family are like, no, insurance isn't good, it's like, I understand why, right? It's just happened to one of our family members and we never learned anything else around it. And also that happened. That was that was not what the intention was, right? So it's honoring again both things of like taking the aligned action and also knowing internally what's happening.
Important.
It's a lot of emotions with finances.
Yeah.
And understanding the evidence is what I was hearing. Like understanding the evidence that we're receiving, which can be really difficult when it's with money. I think even more difficult because there's this just enhanced attachment to it. And I've been, since our first episode, I just have been getting this vision of like, and it didn't used to be like this. It was trading, it was handshakes, it was this whole other way of, I have their word,
the integrity.
Yeah, things were different. I mean, I invite people to like think about their grandparents' retirement, their great grandparents' retirement. Like retirement as we imagine, dream of it today was not around 100 years ago. 401ks are like 50 years old, right? So society has changed faster than our brain and money in many different areas of our life. And we just have to focus on like learning the skills necessary to navigate the world that we're in, while also understanding like there's a lot of changes that need to be made across society and within ourselves.
We get to change.
We can change. Right?
Yeah.
Mm.
I love that. So many people I believe needed to hear everything you shared on our first episode and in this one. And I love that you have access, right? It's not just, I only work with millionaires. It's just wherever you are, like you said, from unemployment to whatever. I know that people are going to be checking the show notes for the quiz from last time, the assessment, and then also for all of the different ways to connect with you and all of that. If you have, because we've mentioned it a few times, if you have an upcoming workshop or something where people can jump right in and do some work with you, is there something that you'd like to share here?
I have a self-guided course, and that's like a standalone course that's always open, specifically on budgeting. So it's a 4-week course. You get these weekly emails of like how to start to build your budget. And we start off with understanding your values, understanding your money, different like money cadence. If you're self-employed, well, when does your money come in, right? You need to be really aware if it's not consistently every other week. And I call that course La Boujette et la Lune. The word budget actually comes from a French word, Boujette, which means little bag, right? So I want everybody to like think of France in the 1500s and people walking around with a little leather pouch where they kept their coins and their IOUs. It wasn't a way for them to measure their ability to be an adult or their self-worth or anything. It was just a little bag to keep track. La Boujette et la Lune, and la Lune is French for moon. I connect budgeting with the moon just because, like the moon, it's not always full, right? It goes through different cycles. Again, asking people, inviting people to be in relationship with money and understanding how cyclical it can be. You're not always going to be paying off that from college. You're not always going to be earning what you're currently earning. Like, have an idea that more is possible. So that's also why budgeting can be really helpful. There's an exercise that's included on there that's called a 3-tier budget. So just like a 3-tier cake, at the bottom we have like, what is your foundation, your minimum? You're like, this is covering food and shelter. In the middle, we have what's comfortable. You are getting the monthly massages, you are getting the different facial treatments, you are giving more charitably. And then what's luxury? What does it look like for you to have like an extravagant life where you're flying your family to Europe for the weekend, or whatever that means for you, right? Understanding what those expenses are will give you clarity on what your income needs to be for each of them. And that can both be daunting, but it also can be really activating of like, I can actually make that happen. Or deciding that the additional work that would be needed for me to do that is not worth the time I would take away from the other parts of my life, right? Speaking to what my parents got trapped in, where they were so focused on money that they forgot a lot of other parts of their life. So these kind of thought experiments are, again, more ways to be in relationship with money. And I invite people to check that out. La Boujette et la Lune. You can find it on my website.
I love hearing you say that. La Boujette et la Lune.
I lived in France when I was a teenager, so.
Whose body is at ease? I'm like, let's cook.
Doesn't it feel good? Like, ooh, talk to me about money. La Boujette, la Boujette. The little bag.
Someone literally, I had a call this morning and someone opened it with bonjour. And I was like, oh my God, are we in France? Can I be eating a croissant right now with the best coffee ever? Oh, this was just such a treat to get to know you and receive all of your gifts. Thank you so much for taking this time and spending it with this community and you all. Go grab all the info in the show notes. Leave some comments below, like what landed on your heart the most. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I love the topic.
It shows.
So yummy. Y'all tune in next week. We will be back continuing this series, all things rich. Until next time, stay still. Bye.
Love you.